One of Nicky Scarfo's oldest friends and top associates, Nicholas Nick the Blade Virgilio, had received a 12 to 15-year sentence for a 1972 killing that occurred while Nicky Scarfo was locked up in Yardville. From behind bars, Scarfo, through his nephew Philip Leonetti and attorney Harold Garber, had arranged for a $6,000 bribe to be paid to the judge on the Blades case in exchange for a lenient sentence. The deal had been brokered using a wheeler-dealer Atlantic City lawyer and shyster named Edwin Eddie Helfant, himself a part-time municipal court judge who was facing an indictment for fixing cases in the Summers Point Municipal Court. Helfant owned the Flamingo Hotel in Atlantic City, where Philip Leonetti and Pepe Leva had gotten into a fight 8 days before he was killed. Instead of paying off the judge in the Blades case, Helfant kept the money for himself and split it with a friend, an associate of Nicky Scarfo's, named Alvin Feldman. The Blade received a substantial prison sentence. The double cross would eventually cost both Eddie Helfant and Alvin Feldman their lives.
Back in 1972, when my uncle was in Yardville, and he found out what Judge Helfant and Alvin Feldman did to the Blade, he went nuts. He was furious. I'd never seen him this angry. Adding to that, my uncle believed that Judge Helfant gave testimony to the State Commission of Investigation. The same commission my uncle, Angelo Bruno, Jerry Cattina, Bobby Manna, and all those guys refused to testify in front of. And that he had talked about my uncle and Ange to the SCI. My uncle also believed that Judge Helfant was talking to the feds. He'd say, "This guy's a double agent." This Alvin Feldman was no fucking good. He called himself the King of the Jews. He had a couple of dirty bookstores with my uncle. And the word going around Atlantic City was that Feldman was going to kill my uncle by putting a bomb in his car. My uncle knew he was ripping him off, skimming money from the businesses. This was going on long before my uncle went to prison. My uncle used to say he was a backstabbing cocksucker, but my uncle couldn't get the okay to have him killed because at the time, Alvin Feldman owed 60 grand to Papi Ippolito, one of Ange's top guys. Ange told my uncle that once Papi got his money back, he could have him clipped. I remember my uncle saying, "I wish I had this 60 grand. I'd pay the Jew's debt to Pappy myself. And that's how bad I want to whack this motherfucker." So one day, my uncle approaches Ange in Yardville and tells him he wants to kill 3 people. He tells him he wants to kill his 2 partners in Atlantic City, Tommy Butch and Alvin Feldman, and that he wants to kill Judge Helfant. My uncle gives his reasoning for each of the killings and tells Ange that he knows Papi Ippolito had gotten his money back from Alvin Feldman. Ange gives him the okay to kill all 3.
Thomas Tommy Butch Bucci ran the Penguin Club with Nicky Scarfo in the late 1960s and early 70s on Atlantic Avenue near the corner of Virginia in Atlantic City. The Lounge, which featured strippers, was considered a bust-out joint where the working girls tried to hustle male customers by enticing them to buy overpriced bottles of champagne.
The Penguin Club was a dump, but my uncle was making money there. My uncle was loaning and making book out of there. But when he went to jail, Tommy Butch stopped paying off the cops, and eventually, the place got shut down. This made my uncle furious. This is why he wanted to kill Tommy Butch. He'd say, if this cheap motherfucker didn't stop paying off those no-good greedy cocksuckers, I'd still be making money over there.
Bucci knew that Scarfo would want him dead, and within weeks of the Penguin Club closing down, Tommy Butch left Atlantic City and resettled himself in South Philadelphia, working for Funzy and Mark Marconi, two guys that Scarfo knew well. The move would save Bucci's life.
When my uncle was younger, he and Mark Marconi were the best of friends. But they had a falling out. It was a big mess. It put a strain on their relationship. My uncle told me, if Tommy Butch starts coming back down to AC, I want you to tell the Blade to kill him on the spot. If he stays in Philly, I'll leave him alone. For now. This was before the Blade went to jail. Probably around 71.
While Tommy Butch got a pass, the King of the Jews wasn't as lucky.
Joseph Scalise was a member of our organization. He was based in northeastern Pennsylvania, part of Santo Idone's regime. Scalise reaches out to Alvin Feldman, tells him he wants his help in torching a warehouse in Pennsylvania. Alvin Feldman goes for it, thinking it's a score. This fuck never turned down an opportunity to make money. My uncle used to say, this cocksucker is so greedy, he'd kill his own mother for $200. So once Khalid gets Alvin to the warehouse, Santo Idone, Chickie Narducci, and Chickie Ciancaglini, they run up on him, start roughing him up. Santo Idone grabs him from behind and Chickie Narducci goes to stab him with an ice pick. But Alvin gets away, and Chickie ends up stabbing Santo instead. As Alvin is running away, Ciancaglini grabs him. Ciancaglini is big, strong as a fucking ox. Chickie ended up killing him with the ice pick, while Ciancaglini held him. They dumped his body down some sort of sewer in the woods. When my uncle heard the details, he loved it. He said, I hope the rats in that fucking sewer ate the eyeballs out of his fucking head.
Judge Eddie Helfant, the third person Scarfo had gotten permission to whack, was living on borrowed time. Only he didn't know it.
My uncle decided to wait for the Blade to get out of jail before they would kill him. He wanted to give the Blade the opportunity to kill him himself. When my uncle got out of jail, Judge Helfant came to see him, concocted some story about the judge in the Blade's case, taking the money and not doing the right thing. My uncle pretended he bought it, but we knew he was lying. he was no good. And my uncle, he'd had enough of him.
But Scarfo decided to lull the unsuspecting Helfant into thinking everything was okay, that all had been forgotten.
Judge Helfant was having problems with his own indictment for fixing cases. He came to see my uncle for help. He wanted my uncle and Harold Garber to fly down to Atlanta and talk to one of the witnesses about not testifying. So my uncle flies down to Atlanta with Harold and meets with the witness. And lo and behold, the guy doesn't want to testify now. Judge Helfant might actually beat his case. So, one day I'm having lunch with my uncle at the Madrid. Chickie and Lawrence were with us. And Lawrence says, "Nick, why would you go all the way to Atlanta to help this fuck after everything he's done?" My uncle says, "I don't want him to go to jail. I want him dead." That's the extent he went to set the trap for this guy. Like Louis DeMarco and Pepe Leva. Judge Helfant never saw it coming.
Loud and boisterous and somewhat tipsy, Helfant was in good spirits, as his legal team expected to win a motion to dismiss his indictment in 2 days, thanks to Nicky Scarfo's recent trip to Atlanta, ending what had been a decade-long fight by prosecutors to put the crooked judge in jail. Eddie Helfant was sitting on top of the world. He had less than 30 seconds to enjoy the view. Judge Helfant, his wife, and another couple were sitting at a table. The Muhammad Ali-Leon Spinks fight was showing on a closed-circuit television behind them. As the snow fell on this cold February night, no one thought anything of the tall and somewhat lanky man who walked into the Flamingo with a snow shovel in his right hand, wearing a black ski mask. The man placed the snow shovel near the door and moved quickly towards the judge's table, which had been pinpointed moments earlier by a spotter, who relayed the information to the man with the shovel. The lounge was packed and dimly lit, and no one seemed to pay attention to the man in the ski mask, swiftly approaching the judge's table. That was about to change. Placing his left hand on the back of the man seated at Judge Helfant's table, the man in the black ski mask raised his right hand, carrying a .38 caliber handgun and a 6-year-old Grudge, and fired 4 shots at his target, 1 to the head, 3 to the chest, as his wife shrieked in horror. Judge Helfant was dead before his body crumbled to the floor. As the Blade walked the escape route from the murder scene at the Flamingo, his old friend, Nicky Scarfo, was parked in a predetermined spot to drive him away, just as he had done when Philip Leonetti and Vincent Falcone killed Louis DeMarco less than 5 blocks away, 3 years earlier.
This was big. Big news in Atlantic City and Philadelphia. The fact that a judge got killed, It made all the fucking papers. Everybody was talking about it. The mob guys in South Philly, up in North Jersey, they knew it was us. A lot of the guys in New York took notice. My uncle loved the attention, especially the fact that other mob guys were talking about how fucking ruthless we were. He would say to me, "We can hold our head high when we're around our friends," meaning other mob guys, other families, because everyone knows who we are, what we are. And there ain't too many guys out there like us. My uncle saw himself as an old school gangster, even though by this time he wasn't even 50 years old. He looked up to the old time guys, the Capones and Lucianos, and especially the killers like Skinny Razor. And he was right. There wasn't too many guys like him in La Cosa Nostra. In fact, I don't think there was anyone who enjoyed killing as much as he did. Except maybe the Blade. But the Blade wasn't all bad. He had a good side to him. When he wasn't drinking or killing people. There was this kid who was around at the time. We called him Bitter Beep. He was a bookmaker. He was a good kid. He didn't bother nobody. He used to go to Harry the Hat's coffee shop and play cards. Some of the older guys there, they used to cheat him, take his money, because he didn't know how to play all of the games. Motherfuckers were hustling him. I guess the Blade heard about it. One day, when Bitter Beep was playing cards in the coffee shop, who comes walking in? The Blade. Everyone in that shop knew who he was, and that he was a serious fuck who happened to be a killer, who happened to be around me and my uncle. So the Blade goes over to Bitter Beep, taps him on the shoulder, says, "Let me play your hand." Bitter Beep has no fucking idea what's going on. But what's he gonna say? No? To the Blade? So he jumps up. The Blade sits down, tells the guy dealing, "Deal the cards." The guy deals, and the Blade never turns his cards over. He looks around the table at every one of the guys who had been robbing Bitter Beep and says, "I win. Deal another hand." The dealer deals the next hand. The Blade does the same thing. Never looks at his cards. How about that? "I win again. Deal another hand." This went on for almost an hour. He took every penny off those motherfuckers, several $1,000s, and handed it all to Bitter Beep. No one ever cheated him again.
Nicodemo Scarfo and his gang were now thriving in Atlantic City, but things in South Philadelphia were going from bad to worse for Scarfo's boss, Angelo Bruno. In 1979, casino gambling was in full swing, and Atlantic City was in the midst of a comeback. Real estate development was thriving, and construction was booming. So were traditional mob rackets like bookmaking, loan sharking, and extortion. Nicky Scarfo and his crew had positioned themselves to cash in on all of it. While things were looking up for Scarfo in Atlantic City, longtime Philadelphia mob boss Angelo Bruno was slowly starting to lose control of the crime family he had overseen since 1959.
When Ange became boss, he aligned himself and the Philly mob with the Gambino family in New York. Ange and Carlo Gambino, the boss of the Gambinos, they were very close. They had worked together as bootleggers when they were younger. Carlo Gambino had used his influence on the commission to help Ange win the dispute with Mr. Miggs. That's how Ange became the boss. And he remained loyal and indebted to Carlo Gambino. At the time, the Gambinos were the most powerful family in La Cosa Nostra. And Carlo Gambino, who was known as Don Carlo, was the Il Capo de Tutti Capi, the boss of all bosses.
But in 1976, the 74-year-old Gambino would die from a heart attack. And almost overnight, it seemed that Angelo Bruno's power began to wane.
Around this time, Angelo Bruno and Phil Testa started having problems with each other. Ange was the boss, and Phil Testa was the underboss. But they were at odds about money and how to run the family. Ange was more of a white-collar guy, and Phil Testa was a blue-collar guy, a street guy. So, they both had different philosophies. There's an old saying that Sicilians love their money more than they love their children, and that they really love their children. With the Sicilians, it always came down to money. And both Ange and Phil Testa were hard-headed Sicilians. We called them Siggies, slang for Sicilian. So one day, we're at the office on Georgia Avenue, and Ange comes down to see my uncle. It was in the summer, and Ange used to have a home in Ventnor. Sometimes when he was down, I'd be his driver. Ange knew that my uncle was 100% La Cosa Nostra, that he knew all the rules, all the moves, and knew all the angles better than some guys who had been around this thing for 50 years. He knows. There's no bullshitting my uncle. You always had to give it to him straight. He got to know my uncle real well when they were in Yardville together. And me as well. We had already done the DeMarco hit for Chickie Narducci. And Chickie was one of Ange's top guys. One of his top earners. He too was a hard-headed Ziggy. At the time, Chickie Narducci was also having problems with Phil Testa. So Ange comes in and says, "Nick, you know that me and Phil are having problems. I just wanted to see what side you're on. Now here's the boss the family, coming to see us about the problem he's having with his underboss. That's how far we had come. Angelo Bruno was the guy at my great-grandmother's wake. The guy I thought was the president when I was 7 years old. And now he's coming to see us because he needs our help. He tells my uncle that if you come with me and be by my side, it'll be $1,000 a week for you and the kids. Meaning me, Lawrence, and Vince Falcone would make $500 a week. Ange was trying to get us lined up against Phil Testa so that they could take him out and make Chickie Narducci the underboss. My uncle listens to all of this and says to Bruno, "What do you mean, what side am I on? This is una familia. One family. Let me think it over." My uncle used to tell me, it don't fucking matter what the guys in South Philly say. It matters what the guys in New York say. Because only they can make or break a boss. That's something Skinny Razor taught him way back in the 50s. He never forgot it. Around this time, my uncle and I were going to North Jersey quite a bit. We were spending time around guys like Bobby Manna and Caponegro. We were getting their take on things.
Nicky Scarfo, the boss of the family's Atlantic City operation, knew from his one-on-one meetings with Antonio Tony Bananas Caponegro, the boss of the family's North Jersey operation, that Bruno was quickly losing his grip over the North Jersey faction of the family. Scarfo also confirmed this in his private meetings with Bobby Manna, his old pal from Yardville, who told him that Bruno's days as boss might be numbered.
So about a week or so later, Ange comes around. Him and my uncle go outside for a walk and talk, up Georgia Avenue towards the Madrid. I'm walking a few feet behind them. I got a pistol on me. I'm keeping an eye out for the law, and anyone who may try to hit either one of them. I remember things were so tense in the family at this time. Everybody was on edge. I hear my uncle say, "Listen, Ange, this is una familia. I'm not on anyone's side. I know Phil a long time and I'm friends with him. I know you a long time. I'm friends with you. I know you guys will eventually work things out."
Scarfo's separate meetings with Caponegro and Manna, and his belief that Bruno was a sinking ship, more so than his loyalty to Phil Testa, were the reasons for little Nicky to turn down Bruno's request.
You have to understand our family. The Philadelphia mob controlled Philadelphia, Trenton, Atlantic City, North Jersey, and all points in between. Bruno was the boss of the family, and Testa was the underboss. But they were both in South Philadelphia. My uncle was the boss of Atlantic City, and Caponegro was the boss of North Jersey. My uncle and Caponegro, they were very much alike, in the sense that they were both killers. They both had strong crews. And they both had strong connections to New York. I remember as Ange was driving away, my uncle turns to me and says, "I think he's got some trouble coming his way. And when it does, he ain't gonna know what the fuck hit him."